I'm Henry Baskin, your host for this edition of Due Process. Today we're going to talk about kids and divorce right after this.
Major funding for Due Process is provided by Meade Lexus of Southfield and Meade Lexus of Lakeside, offering a large selection of new and pre-owned certified premium vehicles.
The statistics from the Michigan Department of Community Health tell us that since 2006, the number of divorce cases in the state of Michigan actually dropped. Although rates spiked in 2010, they fell again in 2011 and 12. So according to the Michigan Department of Community Health in 2012, there were over 30,000 children involved in divorce in Michigan. So we have 30,000 children for that 1 year only. And our guest today is Julia Perkins from the firm of Jaffe, etc. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And Mark Sherboth, thank you so much for being back with us.
My pleasure.
You're with the Oakland County Front of the Court and have been for
almost 20 years now.
And the Front of the Court primarily deals with issues involving children, right?
Correct.
Although some property is thrown in.
A little bit. Mostly it's custody, parenting time, support issues.
So Julia, of the cases that you do, what percentage would you say involve children under the age of 18?
Probably about 75% of them.
We have a criteria section in the statute saying that, Judge, you will use the following criteria to determine what is in the best interest of the children.
Right.
Are those being used? Do you use those, Mark?
I use those every time I have a custody or parenting time issue.
Okay. That was over 40 years ago that was written. Amazing. And it was written because the judges were talking about unfit mothers and things such as that. And they decided to use the criteria. Do you use that, Julia?
I try to, absolutely.
Do the judges
all the time.
use it?
I think people say best interest factors a lot.
Right.
They say it sort of in a clump.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think people bring them up from a, here's this best interest factor.
Right.
And so I think sometimes it can become a buzzword.
So it seems that over time, I'm not criticizing, but it seems that it's rolled into, as Julie says, a buzzword. You're in the best interest of the child. But to determine that, you go through 12 at least issues that affect children.
You're supposed to look at all 12, although in each given case, you take a look at those factors of the 12 that are pertinent to the issues.
Yeah, but is it not true that one is not supposed to be more important than the other?
I don't think any factor is supposed to be more important than the other, but certainly there's no, you don't count up the factors and say, you win on 6, you win on 4, you win.
Didn't they
right?
used to do that at one time?
I haven't seen that. And I think the judges, if they actually have a hearing, are very good about using the factors and saying what applies and what doesn't apply.
Go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say, for example, the easiest example is when you have to determine what the preference of the child is. Well, if a child is
right.
4,
the reasonable preference of the child.
Correct. When a child is 4, the reasonable preference won't be nearly as important as when a child is 17.
Well, let me get to that issue, because I have all kinds of parents saying to me, well, my son said he can make a decision when he's 13.
14, right.
Or 14, or some arbitrary number.
Must be on the internet.
Where did that age come from?
I don't know. And I don't think that it must be the internet, because I do get that from a lot of my clients. Well, he's going to be 14, so he can decide where he wants to go.
Right.
And
do you hear that?
Not only do I hear it, but I am currently being litigated in front of me 3 cases where the child is 17 and they're arguing about custody. And the issue becomes really, how do I tell a 17-year-old what to do? But you can't let them make the choice.
Well, wait a minute. Let's get this straight. At the age of 18 or high school, if they're not out of high school, till 19 and a half, I guess, the kids are under the jurisdiction of the court and the front of the court, right?
Until they're 18 in custody.
Okay. Tell me, where did this number come from, 16, 15, 14? Does the court consider it?
I think the court absolutely considers it, but I think a court considers the reasoning behind a 16-year-old, which is, well, dad's a little bit more lenient or mom's a little bit more lenient.
Or dad got me a car.
Right, and they're easier influenced, I think, and are able to convey it better than a 4-year-old. If somebody prompts a 4-year-old to say something, I think that a judge can pick it out like that.
Right.
I think it's a little bit different for 14,
So there is
15,
no
16.
age. I mean, it's up to the court until they're 18. It's shorthanded to decide.
Ideally, it should be up to the parents. And the only time we have a 16-year-old telling us what they think they can do is when the parents have either abdicated that decision-making to the child or have subverted the other party's ability to make decisions on behalf of the child. Because a child shouldn't be making these decisions.
Well, right, but so the internet should be disregarded, and whatever information they're getting. It seems that more and more children are spending a week with dad and a week with mother after divorce. Do you think that's a good thing?
Generally. It's happening more and more. And in general, I do think it's a good thing. In part because I still see that there's a lot of bias in divorce cases with men and women, as much as we're trying to right the ship. But I think that once a divorce starts and the family divides, that, and Referee Sherbo and I disagree on this, that parents step up and they start doing different duties, and I think that they should have the right and the ability to do it if they're appropriate parents.
Okay, Referee Sherbo.
My position on this is more from the child's position than the parent's position. You know, I think it's wonderful when you have parents who live near each other and can co-parent. But, you know, life goes on. Parties move on with their lives. And invariably, these 50-50 agreements, rarely do these 50-50 agreements last that long. And I think the child has to be centered someplace. You're going to have the battle sooner or later anyway.
Well, I have ambivalent feelings about it, but what's best for the child?
But I think what's best for the child is to have a healthy relationship with both parents and not to be taken away from a parent for a significant period of time because they choose to get divorced. And if a parent wants to have that responsibility and can do it, then they should have the opportunity with the child.
I know, but Mark,
that's a little idyllic, I think, in many circumstances.
Well,
I do agree. If in a perfect world, Julie is absolutely right. It would be wonderful to have that. It's just that parties get divorced for a reason, and parties move on with their lives, and you can't expect things to stay the same.
Well, as a result of trying to be fair to dad, and they say, hey, listen, we want the same rights as she has to nurture and grow these kids. So they passed what the 100-mile limit, where you couldn't move more than 100 miles away from your former marital home or something like that. How does that work?
Well, it doesn't work really well, and 50 miles doesn't work really well either. I mean, I don't know where the 100 miles came from, but it's all about the distance, right? And if you go more than 100 miles, then you are changing the ability of that parent to have the same parenting time.
Well, I think what they were trying to do was balance this because you couldn't leave the state of Michigan, which is another subject. So they said, well, I'm going to live in Marquette, Michigan, in the UP, which takes an 8-hour drive from Detroit to parent your child. So I guess someone said 100 miles. What does the 100 miles do for you, Mark?
It creates difficult litigation. As a practical matter, we have many hearings at the front of the court where one of the parents wants to move 95 miles.
Right.
And it's shifting the focus from the distance to whether the child should be allowed to change school. Should it become a custody issue where the child should live with the other parent because you're going to change the child's entire circumstances? It really does not protect the non-custodial parent. And I don't like to use the term father because in this day and age, you know, things have changed a lot. There are a lot of custodial dads.
Right. Primary parents or
yes.
whatever you want to call them.
Right.
Are fathers.
Yes. And they're doing a wonderful job.
Okay. But it seems that the court is sort of saying to them, why don't we do week on, week off, that kind of parenting schedule. It seems that the court has sort of bailed out of this thing by saying, well, I can't decide. We're so close to, when we look at the factors, it's so close, why don't you keep them for a week and you keep them for a week, mother and dad. that works if they're 10 miles apart, same school, stuff like that?
Well, they have to be close because there's only one school that they get to go to, right?
Right.
So if they're with the other parent that doesn't live in the school district, then there's quite a commute. And you do have to look at what time do the children have to get up in the morning to get ready to go to school from that parent's house, and where they're playing sports or whatever.
Right.
But it's not really always week on, week off. It's the 3-2-2 or the
Yeah.
And that's a lot of shuffle.
It's a lot. You see kids with backpacks going back and forth. I used to see them at the airport. Say, where are you going? Well, before we imposed a higher degree of selling on parents who want to move out of state, and we'll get to that after the break, I'd see these kids flying back and forth, and I was wondering, they don't know where their beds are. They don't know where their friends are. They don't know where their best toys are and things, and they have to split it up.
One of the other issues is if the child's on various kinds of medication, are both parents going to be consistent? How consistent are they on the way? I realize kids are adaptable, but are they very different in the way they structure the household?
Well, good point. I asked Julia. I mean, aren't your hardest cases involving custody or parenting time?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the parties are fighting with each other, bringing in their own psychologists or social workers or whatever, and there's this enmity, and they don't get along.
And that's when a court won't order joint custody, and sometimes not even joint legal custody at that point. But let's hope that the court doesn't reward the parent who is creating all of the animosity.
Right. Well, doesn't it seem to you as a practicing lawyer that you're sort of a traffic director? Okay, you got your psychologist, I got mine, bring them in, let them testify, let them try and influence the judge and judge's decision. The point is that when I said 30,000 kids in 2012, what does that mean? It means that's in addition to the kids already under the court's jurisdiction.
And it also is in plus all of the children of paternity cases and other kinds of cases where there's a divorce support cases. We have in excess of 50,000 cases in Oakland
County, 50,000.
Right. And
what, waiting to be decided?
That are, no, some of, well, we have jurisdiction over the children until they're 18.
Right.
And so a substantial number are waiting to be cited, but the others come back to us periodically.
Well, that's what they don't understand at the Supreme Court, that these cases go on forever.
Forever.
It's not like you're going to jail, case over. You're selling this gas station, case over. That's different. This continues. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. I want to ask you more questions about what's fair, what's reasonable, what should we do?
Legal referrals and more information on this and other related topics are available on our website at www.dueprocess.tv. There you'll find information on today's program, helpful hints to legal issues, support materials, and lawyer referrals. You can also stream previous episodes of Due Process.
Let's take a look at what you think.
Children that have been involved in divorce need the support of the entire community.
I think there should be a counseling during this divorce process to the children so that they can cope up with what's happening around them.
Children involving in divorce situations should maybe go through therapy as your parents are going through a divorce and try to talk about it and so they can understand.
I think the parents need to reaffirm that it's not the child's fault that they're getting divorced.
Those two parents may be fighting, kids going back and forth, caught in between. So maybe some broader social network, schools, churches, extended family, friends, social services.
Well, Mark, you talk about Oakland County having 30,000 on hold or coming in or whatever. What about Wayne County, the huge county, all the way from Grosse Pointe down to Flat Rock, Michigan?
Hundreds of thousands of cases.
Okay.
And it's just a tremendously massive system.
Collecting money, for example, which a friend of the court does, is supposed to impose some sanctions for not paying child support. Do you take those cases?
I do.
You do take them?
Yep, all the time.
Well, good for you. I mean, that's almost, no, I'm serious. It's almost hard to find lawyers who want to get involved in that kind of work.
Right, because if they need the support, obviously it's difficult to pay an attorney to get that support. Then it's difficult to get attorney fees from the court for having to go down there and do it. And then in a lot of cases, and you were talking about this earlier, you go down there and you pay for parking. You go to court. You wait a very long time.
Take a day off
and
work,
a lot of times,
half a day off work.
Half a day. Yeah, they have to take off work. And then a lot of times on these show causes, the judge will defer it and bring you back. Or you have so many days to pay, sir. I'm sorry to say, sir, but it's usually.
Okay.
And they don't pay, so then you come back again.
So you pay for parking, pay
for a lawyer,
pay for a lawyer, pay for a half a day off work, and pay for a babysitter.
Right, and we should remember when we ask for fees, we should ask for all of that, including the time off work.
But the judges are reluctant to do that. We're not here to educate the judiciary, but the judges are reluctant to have meaningful sanctions that make you say, hey, I'm not going to miss another payment.
Well, yes and no. Okay. I'm not sure. Being on the other side now, after having practiced for so many years.
You're like a judge.
I have, every Tuesday afternoon, I have between 35 and 40 enforcement hearings. There are those where the parties are completely incapable of working. They're ill, they're injured. For some reason or another, the order is still pending. I have those who are just arrogantly unwilling to pay.
And you do this all day?
Those you approach, you try and punish. And there are some who are struggling. They've lost their jobs, whatever. And, if I put every one of those 35 guys or 35 people in jail, and there's 17 referees in my office or 18 referees in my office, and we each put 35 guys in jail.
Well, you don't have a large enough jail. You can't do that.
And what we really want is the money. So we squeeze every dime we can, and we work with them trying to get them to pay. And that's really what we try to do.
It's tough work. Let me ask you, you say life goes on. People get divorced, and eventually they probably get remarried. Okay? So we have a woman in her 40s, and she has 2 children. And she has what we call joint custody, joint legal custody, which gives access to both parents to medical records and school records and things such as that. She meets a guy who lives in Denver. She wants to go to Denver because she's getting married, and she has a job opportunity.
Had a few of those hearings.
What happens?
Those are tough cases. And, there's obviously the statute that guides us on what the factors are. But, the cases that are most troubling are when they remarry and they're moving because of their new spouse's job.
Okay. Sounds legitimate. I mean, you got to get on with your life. Do you make a choice between who you're going to marry and your kids? Like Sophie's choice?
Well, and I've had cases where I've asked the woman, representing the man, asking the woman who wants to move, if the judge denies your motion and tells you that you can't move the children to Colorado, are you going to still go? And because if they go, they leave the children here. And I've had people answer that question, yes.
Wow.
When internet marriages first became kind of hot.
Meet you on the Craigslist kind of stuff?
You would be amazed at how many people came in, without attorneys mostly, and would say, I want to move. And when the result would be they cannot move, they would leave their children, sometimes with moving to meet and live with men or women who they'd never even met. They've only met online. It is an amazing thing.
I can't keep you here all day. When you talk about living with, I mean, is that another sanction? Is it sanctioned by the court that you can live with another woman, live with a man, with children in the house?
The courts are much less restrictive about that now. There have been some decisions about not getting involved in individual morals. I would say courts look down on either party who frequently change partners in their home. But if you've got a long-standing relationship, the courts usually let it rest.
Yeah, well, we're not going to talk about Simon Cowell here, but but that's for another day, for another case. Let's go back to the woman that has to make, or the man that has to make a choice. I love this person. I want to get married. I want to get on with my life. I'm not going to live alone until my kids are 18 and then have them decide where they want to live. what happened to this? I mean, what do you do for the best interest of the children?
Well, you want to get on with your life, but you made babies with somebody else, and now you have a responsibility. That responsibility doesn't end just because you found somebody that you want to move.
Whoever thought of this? You're married to the person you love, you have children, and the marriage is gone because we have no fault or no reason to divorce. It's over. You telling me that you have to live with that initial decision when you got married? Stay with stay within that person's radius because you can't be in love and get married to the person you love because he lives in California or she lives in California.
Maybe sometimes not. It's.
Well, Mark, you can't.
You sacrifice your children, but
you sacrifice your children. You say, I have to choose. I go back to Sophie's Choice. I have to choose between my son or my daughter.
That isn't exactly what the law says, but it is an issue. There are a few factors you have to look at, whether it's going to improve the child's life, whether there's a reasonable alternative for the other party to visit. And you take a look at factors. Does the non-custodial, the non-primary custodial parent really make use of all their parenting time? Are they involved with the child? And the more involved they are and the closer that relationship, the harder the decision becomes.
Right.
If the parent is distant, it really isn't a very difficult decision. Have you
had judges say to you, she can't move or he can't move?
Yes.
You really?
Yes.
And I've said that on several occasions.
In fact, I think it's easier to defend a change of domicile than it is to win a change of domicile. Although that trend changed a little bit when the economy fell and more people didn't have jobs and they had to go out of state to work.
Right.
I think the judges looked at it differently then because you have to go. But just to leave a job and go somewhere else.
Well, an executive working for General Motors is here, and he has joint legal custody, but he's been transferred to Sacramento. What does he do? Give up the right to have his children every other week? He had?
It may very well be that, but on the other hand, I have also had people who've had reasonably good jobs who have lost them, and instead of moving to Idaho or Denver, have said, will you lower my child support if I work full-time here because I don't want to leave my children?
Yeah, and that's sort of rare, though, isn't it, Mark?
It's not a very regular thing, but it happens on it more and more. The more the non-custodial parents, or what would traditionally be called non-custodial parent, are active in their children's lives, the more you find that kind of thing happening, that the children become more important.
Or get creative. Just fashion a parenting time plan that will work for everybody. Okay, the executive that goes out there can't have the every other weekend or the significant parenting time that he might have had, but he can have the kids for the whole summer.
Okay.
Or, if he's an executive, he has a lot more flexibility to travel in for other things so that,
So holidays and, for example, in the event someone does leave the jurisdiction, but they want their children, you're suggesting spend some quality time in the summer? 4 to 8 weeks?
If there is any money available, and I realize sometimes there isn't, but if you take a look at a calendar, there are almost 3-day weekends every month, almost every month of the year.
I guess so.
And there's no reason that the parent who has to move can't see the children every month. Some periods longer, like over the Christmas holiday longer, but in September there's a 3-day holiday, and there's November there's a 4-day holiday.
There's always Skype too.
There's always Skype.
They can talk to the kids, and there's always the internet. But where are we going here? Does the law have to change? Does the morality have to change? Does the rate of divorce have to change? What has to change? We've got hundreds of thousands of kids who might be leaving town along with their parents, and mothers coming to you and saying, I want to get married. Men say, I want to get married. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but it seems that we're getting deeper and deeper into this hole of not knowing. No attorney can say to a person after a divorce, this is what's going to happen if you do this, this, or that.
Right.
And Mark,
I think on a case-by-case basis, the law evolves. The law is much slower to evolve than society's mores change.
But you make recommendations to the judge. As the referee, you make recommendations.
I do.
And you base it on what you think is fair. what you think is right, because it's subjective.
On what I think is best for the child. I warn people about that all the time. I say, when you people cannot agree on what's going to happen with this child, what happens is you make me the decider.
Right.
And I don't live with you. I don't know anything about you. I only know what's here. And shame on you.
And shame on you. But the point is, you can't say shame on you in Michigan because you could, it just ends. We changed the law so that we have no grounds for divorce. You don't like it, you end it, and that's the way it is. So I have to tell you, your work will never end as long as you're at the front of the court. As long as you practice divorce law, it will never end.
Right.
I mean, it just keeps going on and on. Is there anything you want to say to the people watching?
Well, I don't want to discount the children too much here. Give them, they're evolving too, and they're used to the different name changes and all of that kind of stuff. So they're okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how it's best to talk to your kids about getting divorced. But their friends their parents are divorced.
Right. They're used to it.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, it's not very sad.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Major funding for Due Process is provided by Meade Lexus of Southfield and Meade Lexus of Lakeside, offering a large selection of new and pre-owned certified premium vehicles.